Right. He said there.
No, that's good. Why are you going away? I'm scared of COVID.
I thought you called and waved his magic hand.
I think it's one of good stuff.
We need a picture book.
That's for sure.
Picture book with you now?
Not much.
No, sorry, mate.
Hardly any. Good evening, everybody. Hope it's well. A bit more Agadata, and then we'll get back into Eiruvin. Very, very briefly, somebody said yesterday that the Gemara said there's no heter passive voice in Chutz La'aretz. So somebody said that Chumrah of Yosef Rappaport is out of the window. It's not true. Because the Gemara means that because in Chutz La'aretz there's an abundance of water, Chazal didn't make the kula passive voice of Chutz La'aretz. But as we said, passive voice has within it a huge halacha. That if you put 4 corner posts, it's considered as if it's a Rishus HaYachid. Now, normally, that's Midiraisa. Midirabanan normally got possible by Eiruvin and other objections. And over here, Chazal overrode them for the sake that people should have water. But if those objections are still, okay, so they didn't override them that in Chutz La'aretz you can't drink water when they've got passive voice. But passive voice will still be a mechitza be'etzem. Only for water, you won't be able to drink it because of the problems of Durabanan. But Minater, there would be mechitzas. Would mean that if I'm carrying a Shusarabim, just 3 steps, and I'm carrying from out of an area of passive voice to an area within passive voice, I've done an Issa Deraisa, Shusarabim, Shusayachit.
Is there a concept? Still is a concept.
Of course there would be, because passive voice is like this. Passive voice is what the Torah says, that is really a mechitza Minater. But Durabanan it isn't, as we said, for 3 different reasons, both Eiruvin and Avim Haikisa and all the other problems. But you hear what I'm saying, Levi?
Yes.
So it's a big problem.
We took it away in
That means they didn't give you the head to pass words of Chutz La'aretz. Okay, I don't want to go to it. That's us.
They made the head to start with,
no? No, they didn't. That's what we said before. There is a problem. That means Minhateu, there has to be something. Otherwise, Chazal would never have been over. There wouldn't be matter deraisa. So passive voice must work on some level. Minhateu. Okay, we're up to Daf Chof Beis Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top. A bit more, it makes it worse. It makes it worse. So go some Agadat. Umeshalem the son of al panov lahavido. In the vid, there's an expression ala panim. It's not a nice expression. Ala panim means that something which annoys somebody. It's like a terrible thing on the face. The word Yadash is al panov, that Ki'ilu HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not happy when he rewards the Rishonim. Omar Mishab Nevi and Mali Mikol Kosov, if not for the Pasuk, Yev Shaloim, we won't be able to say it. Kibiyoch HaKadosh Nisim Maser upon a natural person is carrying a heavy burden. Umevakesh LaShlichu Mimenu. And what happens is he wants to throw it off. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't really want to reward the Rishonim. And Mishab El-Panov, against his face, he has no choice, he pays off the Rishonim. But really, if he had it his way, he wouldn't. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Yashua say he does, but really he doesn't want to. Lo yachel lesoino, Hashem doesn't delay for those who he hates. Omad ilay lesoino v'do lo yachel, for his enemies it doesn't delay. Aval yachel letzadikim gemurim, the tzadikim have to wait. Our reward for learning tonight is not going to be paid up tonight. You're not going to come home and on the way home find a diamond. But for the next billion, trillion years, we'll be rewarded for this 45 minutes that we're sitting and learning. That reward will last us for a very, very long time. It's la'acha, Hashem delays it. Today to do them. You can only do mitzvahs today, you can't do them tomorrow. Meaning you can't do them in Olam Haba. The Vanagon, he was Neftach Chol HaMoed Sukkos. And he picked up his tzitzis and he started Chopes of Dalef at 10:59 from the top, now 59 from the top. As he was dying, the Vanagon picked up his tzitzis and started crying. He says, in this world with a few pennies, you can buy tzitzis and get rewarded forever and ever. And in the next world, you can't. So today we can do mitzvahs. Today we can learn v'lo l'mochel ha'aseisim, but we can't. Hayom la'aseisim. Today we do them l'mochel k'avos. The reward is in the next world. Oba b'chagav eitim Rabbi Shmuel Nachmani Ma'id Yichsev erech ha'payim. Erech af mipo yalei. Ha'payim is plural. It should have said erech af. Why did it say erech ha'payim? Elo. Erech ha'payim le'tzadikim. Erech ha'payim le'rishonim. Meaning, ha'payim just means Hashem. Erech ha'payim just means a delay. For tzaddikim, Hashem delays the reward. That even though really a tzaddik get reward immediately, Hashem rewards him only much later in the love. For Rishoyim, Hashem delays the punishment. Even though Rosh get punished in this world, he gets punished in the next world. There are two mahalchim as to what does it mean that Hashem delays the reward, the punishment of a Rosh. If you look in the top Tesis, Tesis says, that means Hashem does not punish a Rosh instantly. Really, the first time a person speaks Rosh, he should drop down dead. The Devar in his first parak described this at great length, right? But what happens is Hashem delays in order to give a person to do tshuva. Others say that this is actually a punishment. Really, for Rosh, it'd be much better to get punished immediately. Only Hashem, because he's annoyed with the Rosh, leaves the punishment for us to love the way it's much worse. Okay, we're finished with our Gadata. In the Mishnah, we had the Machlikas, Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, as to how big passive birois was permitted. Tanakama says passive birois was permitted unlimited. As long as you add panels, there should never be a gap of more than how much? 10 or 13, very good. 13.3 if you want it to be really yekish, but very good, 10 or 13. Oh, it's all done, Mr. Boom. That is that Tanakama. You can do it as big as you want. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, how big is the biggest passive birois you can have? Society, which is how much? 5,000 square meters. Why did he say that Shiur? Where did Rabbi Yehuda get 5,000 square meters for? Where did he get it from? The answer is, because there's a halacha by Karfaf that you mustn't have it more than Beis Hosayim, which is going to be a later mission. And he was worried that if we allow people passive birois more than Beis Hosayim, like you said, then we don't allow more than Beis Hosayim. So therefore, we don't want that people should do a Karfaf more than Beis Hosayim. So that was his reason. Now the question is like this. When he said the Beis Hosayim, did he mean the size of the well? Or did he mean the area of the well plus the area around it? You must remember, what's the minimum size besides the well? How much is the minimum you have to have around the well? 2 amas. Why 2 amas? To get most of your cow in, that you shouldn't get, most of the cow in, you shouldn't get, start taking water out. And the logic is as follows. He was worried that people would say, if I'm allowed to have a passive birois on the basis, I'm allowed to have a cow basis, and that's not true. So therefore, he said only up to Beis Hosayim. Now, do people, when they look at passive birois, they look at the well, and if the well is more than Beis Hosayim, they'll say, well, I'm allowed to calf on Beis Hosayim. But if the well is less than Beis Hosayim, then they won't take into consideration the extra. So you're allowed to have a well up to Beis Hosayim plus the border, which is a kula. You're allowed to have the border another 2 amas. Or did he mean no? The whole area mustn't be more than Beis Hosayim, which means that the well has to be even less than that, including the area around, must be more than Beis Hosayim. That is the next question which the Gemara tackles. The Gemara says like this: Did he mean the well with the enclosure? He meant the well without the enclosure. And the more explains, a person looks at the well. He only looks at the well. And therefore, if the well is less than Beis Hosayim, he won't come to carry the cow for full Beis Hosayim because he'll understand the well is less than Beis Hosayim, the cow is less than Hosayim. So he looks at the whole borders because if you look at the whole borders, so it's not enough for the well to be Beis Hosayim. It has to be the well plus the area around the well must be more than Beis Hosayim. So that is the question we have according to Rabbi Yehuda. Tol Shema. We bring a brisa which essentially is basically like the Mishnah, with 1 or 2 very small additions. The brisa is like this. Many times you have that. The brisa brings down the Mishnah with 1 or 2 extra explanations or quotations, etc. What is the closest you can put the barriers to the well? So you already know. You already said the amount which is the majority of a cow, which is 2 amas. How far can you make the barriers? So then you know. Tanakama says even the Kur and Kuraim, which is huge areas, 10, 20 times the size of Beis Hosayim. Rabbi Yehuda Beis Hosayim mutter, yes, and Beis Hosayim also. Rabbi Yehuda says no, only Beis Hosayim, as actually we said already, only up to Beis Hosayim and not more than Beis Hosayim. Amrul Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yehuda, we don't understand your logic. Iyata Moida do not agree. These are 4 kinds of enclosures which are made for living purposes. As we explained, one of them is to keep your wood. One is to live in, chotza. One is to look after your animals, and one is to fertilize your fields. So these are enclosures which are made to live in. Do you not agree? It's In the end of the day, if you've got an area, you've got a massive back garden, and this is where you live, you're allowed much more than 2 basis time. So why is it that you only say 2 basis time and no more? Where do you get that from? He said to him, wait a second, you can't compare it. By passive, you're relying on just corner brackets, they're not really walls. Therefore, I'm only allowing basis time. But when it comes to a proper enclosure like your back garden, I don't care if it's more than basis time. So therefore, you can't compare. Carries on the price. Boy, the well, basis time, mutter. If it's basis time square, it is mutter. And you're only allowed to go past the well, the majority of a cow, which is 2 hours. And the more so like this. That's the end of the price. And we had a question, Rabbi Yehuda said basis time, did he mean the well, or the well plus the area around? Now in this price, there's actually 3 opinions. The Tanakama says unlimited, Rabbi Yehuda says basis time, and Shimon Elazar says basis time plus the area of the cow. Says the Mokis. Shimon Elazar says basis time is the well plus the area of the cow. When Rabbi Yehuda said basis time, he meant the area of the well with the area around. Because every time you have a different Tana, they must be arguing about something. The Tanakama said unlimited. Rabbi Yehuda said basis time. Came along with Shimon Elazar said basis time of the well, besides for the area around the well. So obviously, when Rabbi Yehuda said basis time, he didn't mean basis time plus the area around the well. Because if he did, that would be identical to what Shimon Elazar saying. But he says, well, you're wrong. Rabbi Yehuda, he meant the well without the borders. That's exactly the Shimon Elazar. Meaning, Shimon Elazar only permitted it if it's exactly a square. But if it's a rectangle, meaning he allowed it, a square we said is 70.6 or something, 70.1. So what happens is like this. According to Shimon Elazar, you only allowed it if it's exactly a square. If you've got, let's say, 100 by 50, which is also 5,000 square meters, it's no good. That's what he said, basis time or basis time. Rabbi Yehuda says no. You can even have it a rectangle as long as the entire area is not more than basis time. This is something which we're going to discuss later by Kalfov. The more square something is, the more it looks like a living area. When you have, let's say, for example, like a backyard which is long and narrow, so people look at it and they say, it just happens to be. You don't really intend to make. You don't plan. You don't build an area or that area. So Shimon also said that when it looks like basis time squared, that's fine. It's a proper square, that's okay. But if it's long and narrow, it's no good. Came along and said, no, I don't care if it's long and narrow. So it comes out there's 3 opinions. Tanakama says it doesn't matter what size, you can always have a passive voice. Rabbi Yehuda says you can have 2 saw of the well, plus an extra 2 amas around for the cow, and it doesn't matter if it's square, rectangle, any shape. Comes along, Shimon Elazar says you can only have basis time of the well plus the extra 2 amas as long as it's a square, but not any other shape. Even Rabbi Yehuda that permits any shape, the Rishonim point out that it has to be the maximum of 100 amas. If you remember, as you said before, what is 2 saw 5,000 square amas? So 100 by 50, that's okay. But let's say you do 200 by 25, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that's no good. Because that is so different from a normal enclosure, even only up to the length, double the width, but not worse situations. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, even he's limited. Now the Gemara, since we mentioned Shimon Elazar, we mentioned another halacha that he says. Klal Omar Shimon Elazar, Kol avir shetashmishu ledir, any air, any enclosure which is made for living in, that means the purpose of the enclosure is for the inside. When you have a garden, why do you have a garden? Not that you should sit in the garden and look out of the garden. That's not the main purpose of the garden. The main purpose of the garden is to be able to enjoy the area of the garden. So then, going to like these areas, it's made for the outside. Watchman's tower. Why does a person have a hut? It's to watch out of it. So then, basis time mutis, basis time also. So this is we'll see again later by Kalfa. That Chazal was scared. A Kalfa. What's the problem with Kalfa? It looks like a Shisarabim. It looks like a completely open area. So for Chazal forbade it unless it looks like a proper enclosure. So the Gemara says now, Shimon Elazar tells us that when something's made to live in, it doesn't matter how big it is. When something's made not to live in, but to live out of it, to see what's out of it, then one is limited to basis time and no more. The Mishnah carries on, a new Mishnah of Beis Amudalev towards the bottom. The Mishnah carries on with the halachas of passive bivois. Let's summarize what we've learned so far. Passive bivois, they have to be an amo by an amo. They have to be at every corner. And that allows you to be able to take water out of the well and to drink it out of the well. We said that min hateva, it's a proper rishus hayachid. Midrabanan it isn't for a variety of reasons. For example, etc. The Chazal allowed it for the purpose that people should be able to drink water aliyah l'regel or for going to learn in yeshivas. And we had the argument as to what exactly is the maximum size of a passive bivois. Comes along the Mishnah says like this. That's also a child of paskin like that. Only human beings, not only animals, but not human beings. Human being is expected to put his head in. Yeah. If it's a public throughway, it goes through the passive bivois, you have to transfer the public throughway and make them walk around it. Because if people go through it, then that is osi rabim mavatli mechitza. The public are mavatli mechitza. It's not necessary. This is actually one of the very big questions in Eiruvin. First of all, it's a big machlokes to Rishonim. The Mishnah brings a long list of Rishonim that pass like the Chachamim, and a long list that pass like of Yehuda. So it's a big argument. Who do we pass like? Do we say that if a public throughway disturbs a mechitza, you've got a kind of mechitza. If a public throughway goes through it, do we say that a lot of people disturb it? So now the Gemara says that's one machlokes. Another machlokes which the Gemara brings, a big machlokes, which is interesting. Which the Gemara is machmir and the Chaznish is meikum, and that is when we say that public, how many people is considered the public? The Mishnah says even if a lot of people, if it's not there very lot, Chaznish says only for 600,000 people. So as Sally, you told me, I think it was that in the Holland they close off the motorway once a year. He said, well, Chag morning for half a minute at 6 o'clock in the morning. The reason is they close off. There's a motorway which goes through the Eruv.
I mentioned it as well.
What
Only history. The one way, they've got a gate there that they close once a year. They made that from
By the way, Tolly, if you've got the ability, just a very small, not that we need the pictures that much, but it's Kedai. Kuf Pei Vov shows you a public throughway and how we're asking everybody to walk around the side. You can show if you got Kuf Pei Vov. And at the same time, you can upload Kuf Pei Zayin and Kuf Pei Ches because it will cover it a little bit. So again, so you've got a public throughway, so you have to tell people move to the side. Can you see the picture? It's not very hard to imagine it. Right, you imagine it, right. Yeah, so you've got, right. Says the Gemara like this. Have you also done, Tony, the next two pictures, because that goes up to the next thing. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. Here, that we see the tremendous power of mechitzas. That what? That here you have passive bivois, loads of people walking through it, and it's still considered a mechitza, even though everybody's walking through it, right? Imagine you've got a triangular post there, hundreds of thousands of people walking through, and we look at it as if it's a wall. So that shows you the power of how mechitza works. It says, well, can this really? Does a Birchon was really hold of this? Yerushalayim would lock the doors every night. If they would not lock the doors every night, carrying Yerushalayim would be awesome because it was just around. Now, Yerushalayim had proper walls. All the way around there was a wall around Yerushalayim, and there were doorways. There was Sosa Pesach. And Afal became, if not for the fact that they would lock it, it would be Rosh Hashanah. Why? In the end of the day, the halacha should be that since it's got Sosa Pesach, it's not a Rosh Hashanah. That's right. There was no breaches more than 10 amas allowed to Sosa Pesach. So therefore, the only reason why indeed it was because hundreds of thousands of people would go through it every day. You should have an entrance to the east, entrance to the west, and people would go through it. So there were hundreds of thousands of people going through it all the time. Since there were hundreds of thousands of people going through it all the time, so therefore it took away the mechitzas. So therefore they had to lock it every night so that it shouldn't be a problem to take away the mechitzas. Is a raya that mechitzas aren't that good. So how can Rabbi Yochanan say, oh, look at this Mishnah, it tells us the tremendous power of mechitzas, it doesn't make a difference if people walk through it, it's still okay. But Yerushalayim, he said it's not okay, only for the fact that they lock the doors. But if not for the fact that they lock the doors, it would be Yerushalayim. As well, can he held of it, he can over here, Mishnah tells us, but we don't hold it. Says like this, in our Mishnah, the Mishnah has a machlokes of Yehuda and the Chachamim. Does a derech which Rabim goes through? Osi Rabim vatni mechitzas. Do we say that the Rabim can come along and destroy a mechitza? That is the question of our Mishnah. And we ask a stira from our Mishnah to our halacha, which we've had quite a number of times. Had it in Shabbos, had it in Eiruvin. And that is, if you've got a Rishus Rabim and you've got houses on both sides of the Rishus Rabim. Shittas Rabbi Yehuda is the famous Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. What's Shittas Rabbi Yehuda? That? 2 walls takes it away from Rishus Rabim. And therefore it's no longer Rishus Rabim. And therefore all you need to do Midrabanan, and I tell you allowed to carry that. Midrabanan, you have to do a post on each side just to show. But Minatera, you would be allowed to carry that because Minatera is not considered Rishus Rabim anymore. You've only got 2 walls. I said this many times. You've got an M62. According to Yehuda, if you've got a bridge, so on each side there's a wall there, the wall on top. According to Yehuda, you'd be allowed to carry underneath it. Because it's not Rishus Rabim. It's got 2 walls. The Chachamim say no. You can't do a nail Rishus Rabim like that. You have to block it off, etc. Now let's compare this to our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, it says that Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're not allowed to have the public going through it. And if the public go through it, you can't rely on the passive voice. What do we see from Yehuda? That when public go through it, it's no longer considered Shusayach, it's Rishus Rabim. And therefore you're not allowed to carry in the passive voice. Which is the exact opposite of what he says in the case where you've got a throughway and house on each side. According to Yehuda, you can make an Eiruvin like that. You've got a wall on each side, you can make an Eiruvin. As long as you've got walls on 2 sides, you're already allowed to carry.
This is it.
Why?
Because it's much less.
In what way?
Because it's just a little corners. You haven't got anything in between.
Oh, that's more answers. Because over here, you've only got corners, you haven't got proper walls. Very good. And let's examine the Chachamim and Shitta. They also seem to oppose themselves. In our Mishnah, they say we don't care if thousands of people walk through. And it doesn't spoil it from being passive voice. And yet, with Rabbi Yehuda's situation, when you've got to Rishus Rabim and everybody's walking through, what the Chachamim say, no, you can't do an Eiruvin. So you see that they do care. And therefore, you have to add a bit more. And in our Mishnah, by having corners, they hold that it's 4 posts. Like you're saying the other half of what we should say. Okay, again, let's get clear the question before we get the answer. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda seems to say that we don't want the public to go through because that spoils Rishus Hayachid, and the Chachamim say we don't care. And in this other halacha, it talks about 2 sides of Rishus Rabim. Rabbi Yehuda says we don't care; it's considered Rishus Hayachid. The Chachamim say it's Rishus Rabim. It says, "Well, what we do, Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya." Yes, okay, even more so, Rabbi Yehuda. Misha shtei bottom shtei tzidur Rishus Rabim. Person got 2 houses, 2 sides of Rishus Rabim. Or he just needs to make a post or beam. But Nosim, the end side is allowed to carry in the middle. Amuloi, they said to him, Ein me'arvin Rishus Rabim bekah. You can't do the Rishus Rabim like this. Kasha Rabbi Yehuda, Kasha Rabbi Yehuda. So Moses, Rabbi Yehuda le Kasha also they kashtei mechitzas ma'aliyaisa. There, as Moshe pointed out, we're talking about you've got 2 solid walls, right? You've got 2 houses, so the house is a proper wall. You haven't got 2 solid walls. You've only got brackets. You've only got corner walls. Here, by passive biros, you've got 4 walls. They are not the best walls. In fact, they're very weak walls because they're only in the corner. But the fact is, they're considered 4 walls. Shaking the Rishus Rabim, you only got 2 walls. You've got the post. The post they hold that's not considered a proper wall. Here you've got Amor ban Amor, that's a proper wall. Let me take this. Rabbi Yehuda holds that 2 good solid walls takes it away from Rishus Rabim and makes it Rishus Hayachid. But 4 flimsy walls or 4 corners does not when the Rabim will walk through it, and the Chachamim said the other way around. 2 solid walls, you've only got 2 walls. That's not only enough. That's a proper Rishus Rabim. But when you've got 4 corners and each corner's got a post on each side, now that's a real Rishus Hayachid. And therefore we don't care if the public goes through. New topic. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Omar Rav Yochanan. Eretz Yisrael in Chayam Nalem Rishus Rabim. In the whole of Eretz Yisrael, there isn't a single Rishus Rabim. Can you imagine such a halacha? This Gemara makes you feel a little better when people say to you, there's no Rishus Rabim in mind. They think, how is it possible? The Shmuel himself says, Which the boy actually is quite machmir. Here the Chazon Ish is more maker regarding this. He says this whole idea that you have to have 600,000 people going on the road. God, in this famous question, do you have to have 600,000 people? It says in the boy, if you have to have 600,000 people going on the road to consider Shushabim, nowhere in the world is there Shushabim. Maybe one or two streets in the world. It says the Mishnah Bun, if that's the case, he asks this interesting. Mishnah Bun says, why did they say no Bro Shofar Mashana on Shabbos? What's the chashash? You might carry farmers to Shushabim. He says, where are you ever going to find Shushabim to ever carry it? So therefore the Mishnah Bun says, of course, we don't pass like that. We don't need 600,000 people. Comes along the Chazon Ish and says, no, 600,000 people, less than 600,000 people is not a Shushabim. Oh, why? Because I think so. For that one town in the world where there's 600,000 people. But I'm just pointing out, I mentioned this there, really, what we should really do is learn the halachos of Eiruvin while we're anyway doing the Gemara of Eiruvin. It's interesting always because we're getting ideas at least of the basics. Here we see. And the fact is the Gemara says over here that the whole of Eretz Yisrael is no Shushabim. Going to the Gemara changes it to the end. What? Right.
That's what they defined as.
Shushabim, yes. And then there were 600,000 people. What do you say? I didn't catch that. Oh, the more explain all this in a minute. I'm just pointing out that I saw today in the report discussing about Tkiyah Shofar. He says, I can't understand. Chazal forbid Tkiyah Shofar. There's no words. It's interesting. There's a letter which somebody wrote to the Chazon Ish, asking, can I do an Eiruvin in Paris? And the Chazon Ish said, yes. Why? He said, there's no roads in Paris which there's 600,000 people. Now, I don't know if that's true today, but I can understand such a thing because to have 600,000 people every day going through it, it's a very, very big road. Probably the M1 has 600,000 people going through it. I don't know.
It's got a roundabout at the end.
Huh? Yeah, but there you go.
Anyway.
Does it have to be every day?
Oh, that's Mishmor said about it. Mishmor says there is those that hold every day. I don't know.
North Circle has a roundabout at the end. And it has to have like another.
Oh, we'll see. The more talks about it out. Okay. Omar Abitzchak by Yosef. Omar Abiyichdot. Eretz Yisrael the Chavdei Rebish Shushabim. There's no Shushabim in Eretz Yisrael. Yosef Avdiba B'Kabal Al Shvaitz. Avdimi said over this thing. Avdimi said over this thing that there's no Shushabim in Eretz Yisrael. Omar Le'Abale Avdima. My timer. What's the reason? We're up to Chof base on the base, the top of the page. Ilema. If you're going to say to me the reason why there's no Shushabim in the whole of Eretz Yisrael. There are two big hills in Eretz Yisrael, one in the north and one in the east. In the north, it's a very, very high climb. And to get there, you have to go up a cliff. And in the east, there's a slope. And therefore, it's considered that you've got two walls. Two walls is no longer considered a proper Shushabim. The two walls are not parallel, the walls are like this. So you haven't got an area that people can just walk through. Oh, now how steep does a mountain have to be? Very good. Not 10 tefachim by 4 amos. So he didn't need to say a big cliff. All he needed to say, let's get more clear for a second. All he needed to say was that imagine there's 10 tefachim by 4 amos, not such a big climb, right? 10 tefachim is 1.5 meters by 4 amos by 2.5 meters. So if you've got 1.5 meters by a climb of about 2.5 meters, that's a steep thing. That's considered a wall. If that's considered a wall, you got one wall across the east of Eretz, one wall across the north of Eretz, and that's it. You've got no Rishus Eretz. He says if that's the case, Bovel Nami. Bovel as well would have no Shushabim. Why? There are two rivers in the one called the Pras, one the Digras, and Euphrates and whatever it is, and therefore it's no good. The whole world will never have a Shushabim because you've got seas around it, and since you've got seas around it, so therefore it's not considered a Shushabim. And the Gemara therefore says that the cliffs of Eretz Yisrael do not take away from the fact that it's a Shushabim. The Gemara though does not ask, but why not? Why not? In the end of the day, there are cliffs in Eretz Yisrael. So why does that not take it away from Shushabim? And here there's a big machlokes to show you, which makes a huge nafkemina halacha l'maisa. And again, Mishmor is machmir m'chadash is making. If you want to see it inside a little bit, Tosis, the second Tosis. Tosis in the middle of that second Tosis, it says. Betema, it's not mamish in the middle, 6 lines in. והבנו כל העצות, תעשו שסייחת, על ידי סומה דצום, יחסן דגודו. או בואו נאמר, תקף פלוג דקיבס, ולא יעש ואתה בחיצה עשו. So he's asked the question, at the end of the day, there are cliffs in Eretz Yisrael, and are rivers in Bavel. Why in the world is there a Shasram there? I'm not going to do it for all the words today, it's just going to last 3 lines. V'yesh loima. The mechitza shenasuya b'dei Adam nechashiva mechitza kolehai, v'afilu avadam moed d'asam amat nech mechitza. There's a difference between mechitza, which is man-made, and not man-made. What's the opposite of man-made? Naturally made. And he says like this. A natural mechitza is a mechitza, just like a man-made, but there's one difference. We said in our Mishnah, there's a machlokas tanoim, do rabbim spoil a mechitza. That means, if we make a wall over here, and then millions of people walk through, does it spoil the mechitza? Machlokas Rabbanan and Yehuda. Comes along and says that even though the chachamim say that rabbim cannot be mevatel the mechitza, that it doesn't matter how many people go through, a wall is a wall, but they agree, they say that only regarding a man-made mechitza. And natural mechitza, we don't say that. So therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, let's say, or in Bavel, wherever you go, there's a wall on one side of the cliffs, the other side, another set of cliffs. But the fact is, it's not man-made. And are the rabbim mevatel mechitza? Of course there are, because every day there's hundreds of thousands of people going up and down the country. So therefore, that's why you can't rely. But if you would make a mechitza, that means if you'd actually set about and build a structure around Eretz Yisrael, the fact that there's 100,000 people going, or 1 million people going through it, wouldn't stop it. It would not be a Rishus Rabbim because it's man-made.
No machlokes really has to be natural, not between what I think.
No.
There's recently about these comma and
No.
the guy stuck in
No, that was something else. I just want to finish off this stuff, sorry, because it is a complicated point. Okay, no, there is, regarding something else, there was a shiloh where there was somebody stuck the Gabi Ruve Tchumin, and therefore is considered within which area it is. The Ritva argues the Tosis. The Ritva says, no, it makes no difference if it's man-made or natural-made. Either way, a rabbim cannot spoil the mechitza. As long as the rabbim feel that they're walking through the mechitza. That means they have to feel that they're going through the mechitza. And he says over here, when you've got cliffs 100 miles away, you don't feel that this mechitza is affecting. So according to the Ritva, it doesn't matter if it's man-made. As long as you know, you feel that you're in it, that's considered the mechitza. And the question is, what's considered feeling in it, what's not? And how do we pass? And this is a very big shayla. It's a big shayla regarding osman mechitza. So for example, if you want to rely on the Eiruvin River, and the fact is many people go through it, so according to Tosis, it wouldn't help you anymore. Why wouldn't it help you? Because it's not man-made. I don't think it's man-made. And therefore, mechitza. According to Vitvoy, it's a good Eiruvin, as long as you know and you're aware that you're all within the Eiruvin River status. Okay, let's just summarize a little bit what happened. That's a different thing. That's the guy passive voice. Yes, therefore that would be. Yes, therefore would be, you're not making better, you're making worse. You wear that.
No, they're calves.
The cards, therefore, the passive voice.
They would be natural.
Yes, okay. Let's get it clear what we said so far. Somebody came over the name of Dimmi came and said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yitzchak said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. There's no Rishus Rabbim in Eretz Yisrael. Actually, Dimmi also said it. Yitzchak and Rabbi said that, but I don't understand. If you're saying because of all these natural barriers, that doesn't make any sense. Why does it not make any sense? Because Bavel and the whole world has that. So what do you mean? So it doesn't mean that. Elo, one says, Dilma, what you meant is as follows. Malus umoivodis ka'omros, meaning that when you've got a very steep hill, then the area of the steepness of the hill is not a Rishus Rabbim. That's the second picture I asked you to put up, not a very major picture. That if you look, imagine you've got a road that goes up a mountain, right? There's actually a road in the Lake District called the High Street. And if you climbed it, it's a very nice road to go. It goes very, very high, beautiful mountain to climb. And it's a very wide, what? Oh, the snake pass, that's a better example, more common. Would the snake pass become a Rishus Rabbim? Where it goes up more than 10 tefachim in 4 hours. It's quite inclined, it's got a very steep incline. That's what he said. That in the areas where it's a steep incline, there cannot be a Rishus Rabbim, even if there are 600,000 people walking through it, because it's not comfortable. Why? In the Midbar, was there any hills in the Midbar? Very good. Who says that? Rashi over here says it. Rashi says that the Anana had covered, we got rid of all the mountains. So when they went in the Midbar, it was all smooth. So therefore, you can't have a Rishus Rabbim on a mountain. Says the Gemara, he was very happy with his answer. What?
Valley as well.
In the valley as well. It's steep up, steep down. Omele, he was very impressed with him. I saw your big head between the pillars. It's a compliment, that. Meaning like this, that really Abai wasn't alive when Rabbi Yochanan spoke. Abai was only born much later. But he was so impressed with Abai's explanation of Rabbi Yochanan. He said, you must have been there. I must have seen your head when Rabbi Yochanan spoke. Rabbi Yochanan said, there's no Rosh Hashanah there, so. And the Gemara haven't understood there's no Rosh Hashanah anywhere near Eretz Yisrael. He meant no, there's no Rosh Hashanah in the mountains. Why did he mention Eretz Yisrael? Very good. The Ritva says that the Eretz Yisrael is very, very hilly. And therefore, because Eretz Yisrael is very hilly, Rabbi Yochanan tried to say that in Eretz Yisrael it's very hard to find Rosh Hashanah. Even the Kvish Achat, even the main road, if you go towards Yerushalayim, it gets very, very steep. So again, you see, because it's very steep. Says the Gemara, the whole Gemara now goes about this one point again and again. When Rabbi said this thing, I saw you there because you must have worked it out from him. Not like the desert. So any mountain climbs, any roads go up a snake pass, any steep road, there's no Rosh Hashanah, even if it would have all the other rules of Shushabim. It's got 6,000 people, it's very wide. Yes, you got steep areas. What? Is it 2 or no? 10th Fachim is 1 in 2.4. It's 1 in 2.4. 1 in 2.4 is how much degrees? 40% degrees. It's quite high. Yes, it's quite steep. 1 in 3, but. Now, Tosfos says the next Gemara did not know the previous Gemara, because I didn't know the previous Gemara, the whole Shiloh wouldn't have existed. Look, Tosfos, tell him it's like at the fourth Tosfos, very short. Okay. But we see at the end of the Gemara, it goes like this. If you've got a mound which goes up 10 tefachim within 4 amas, and everybody climbs up this mound, it's normal for everybody to walk along it. Is it Rosh Hashanah or not? And the Gemara goes again and again and says the same cheshbon again. In our Mishnah, we had passive voice. According to the Chachamim, did it matter that the people went through it? No, it didn't matter. Why? It's still considered a Rosh Hashanah. According to Yehuda, it does matter. So the Gemara says like this. According to the Chachamim, it's no shayla that it's not a Rosh Hashanah. Why not? If already now Mishnah Master of the Nichitash Mishtik, where the passive voice is comfortable to walk through it. So at the end of the day, passive voice spoils it and makes it a Shusay Yochid. The fact that hundreds of thousands of people walk through, it still remains a Shusay Yochid. On this mound, where it's uncomfortable, at the end of the day, it's a climb. Kolshkin is not a Kavachim. Of course, it's a Shusay Yochid. When did he say that when Rabbim come along? That it's still considered a Rosh Hashanah is only because it's considered Rosh Hashanah because it's easy to go through. Therefore, you can't be Mavatal Mechitza. Or Yidum Shlomo makes no difference. I just want to explain this again clearly. If you've got the picture, which study hopefully by now I'll put up, it is like this. If you look at this picture on Kuf Pei Zayin, you've got a Rosh Hashanah, a public throughway, and everybody climbs past. As you can see, lots of people walking up and down the mount. This mound is actually, halachically speaking, Rosh Hashanah. Why is it Rosh Hashanah? We once said, any wall which has got 10 tefachim, any area which is 10 tefachim high, an enclosure by 4 tefachim, 4 by 4, and 10 tefachim, no, 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, a post box, it becomes Rosh Hashanah. Now it's plunked in the middle of Rosh Hashanah, and everybody's walking through it. Now you could say like this, it's Rosh Hashanah. So people go from Shlam to Shachet, from Shachet to Shlam, and you walk past the mount. And where's the walls of this Rosh Hashanah? The sides, if you look carefully, they even try to show you on the picture a little wall. That is the wall. Or you could say, wait a second. Here, since so many people walk through it, the walls are not considered anything, and therefore it's considered a Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says, let's contrast it to our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, you've got passive voice. Passive voice, do they make it uncomfortable to walk through? No. And Alpha became, the Chachamim will say, that we don't care if people walk through it, it's still considered Shusay in this case, it's Rosh Hashanah where it's uncomfortable to walk. Now, Sheikh is according to Rabbi Yehuda that by passive voice, once hundreds of thousands of people walk through the passive voice, it becomes Rosh Hashanah. So now we can declare, what about this case? Do we say if 100,000 people walk through this, it becomes Rosh Hashanah? Or do we say, no, here it's uncomfortable, and Abuda would agree to Rishus Hayachid? So the Gemara says like this. So he asked him this Shaila, Omalei Chayovin it's a Rishus Rabim. Even if it's so steep that the only way to walk along it is to have a rope. Sometimes you walk somewhere, it's very, very steep. The only way you have to do is a tangling rope. Like children up a slide, sometimes in the play area, they have a rope coming down, and they hold on the rope, and that way they get up the slide. That's still a Rishus Rabim. Even if base mowing, even there it's considered Rishus Rabim. Anybody know what the connection between base mowing and Elul is?
Yes.
Name mowing.
Yeah.
And the Sana Turkov. What's it mean? No, it's the same thing. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah that there was a very, very, very steep path, and you could only go single file. And we come to Rosh Hashanah to Madin, Baruch Hu judges every individual by himself, like he's climbing up a base more. Okay. So the Gemara says, even in such a place, it's considered Shasam. The Gemara asks now a few questions, and every question goes with the same mahalach. Let's get it very clear. We will bring a place where it says that public walking through somewhere is still considered Rishus Hayachid. And every time the Gemara says it can't be talking about the Chachamim, because according to the Chachamim it's obvious it's Rishus Hayachid, because they even say by passive voice it's Rishus Hayachid. So it must be talking about Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore the Gemara goes back every time to the same side. Let's see inside. Esvei. The Gemara says like this.
We're not saying that Rabbanan hold that verse is...
What?
Passive verse is special because of...
No, because the case that we're bringing over here will also be similar. We had this once before. Imagine you have a private chotzer, right? You have your own private garden, like with Will Knopfler's house. It's a private chotzer. And people, imagine hundreds of thousands of people would go through it every day. Imagine. What would you say for Shabbos? Is he allowed to carry his garden? Yes.
I think he tells people that they have to ask for shus to keep it.
Yeah.
Keep
So
it.
that anyway, whether not, it's a Rishus Hayachid.
Still is.
Still Rishus Hayachid.
Like you need 600,000 people.
No, because it belongs to the individual. We'll see in a minute. Rishus Rabim L'Tumah. We said like this. Rishus Rabim L'Tumah. We had this once before. Sofik Tumah. What's the halacha by Sofik Tumah? Is Sofik Tumah Tomei or Toy? Rishus Rabim Toy. Rishus Hayachid Tomei. How do we know that? From Sota. We only had this a few thousand times so far. So for the Gemara asks like this: if you've got a Rishus Hayachid which people go through it, so for Tumah and Tava, it's considered Rishus Rabim. If Gavil would find a Sofik Tumah, I don't know if it's considered. It's not so many people go through it. Only a few hundred every day. Imagine an area, a real place. Every Shabbos. Imagine a place where hundreds of thousands go in. So for Tumah, it's considered Rishus Rabim, which is Achid Shabbos. Money. Who said this statement? Ilim Rabbanon. So if it's a Chachamim, Pashto, why do you need to tell us this? What in the world are they teaching us? If in our Mishnah, the Nichatash Mishnah, where it's comfortable to walk through, because it's not a chotzer, it's just passive voice. It's still considered Rishus Hayachid. He goes through somebody's chotzer. They haven't taught me anything. It's no chiddush, it's obvious. Must be Rabbi Yehuda, and he holds that it's considered Rishus Hayachid, and not like what you just told me a minute ago that in a place where people walk, it's considered Rishus Hayachid. It's just a Rabbanon. Oh, if it's Rabbanon, what's the chiddush? In our Mishnah, they told us that passive voice, it's Rishus Hayachid. Kavachime, this chot says Rishus Hayachid, which is the chiddush is the other half. That even though many people that belongs to an individual, and you might have thought it belongs to individuals, so for Gabi Tumah V'Tara, it's considered Rishus Hayachid. No, for Tumah, it doesn't depend on Na'asim Alochas as Shabbos. For Tumah, it depends solely if there's a lot of people there or a little bit of people there. So the chiddush is for the second half. And it also is exactly the same style again. Toshima, the voice of Floshim, the boys, this is the picture, which is the next picture, which Tony put up, is the picture is, you've got a mavoi, and there's a big, big well at the entrance of the mavoi. Now, what do people do when there's a big well?
Walk around it.
Very good. Toshima, voice of Floshim, the boys speak sichid of always. And they've got this big well, or cave, or pit, which is a Yachid, the Shabbos Shabim L'Tumah. Now, the boys, first of all, gets upset with the Diktuk Koloshim, but boys in wells, Sakadatach, you think that the whole mavoi is inside the well. That doesn't make any sense to have a mavoi in a well. It means that the mavoi goes to a well. It doesn't go in a well, it goes to a well. Okay. Yeah, but it would be very strange to have a mavoi inside a crater. That's the one understands. So the verse is like this. Rosh Hashanah the Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah the Tumah. It's Rosh Hashanah for Shabbos, like we said before. And Rosh Hashanah the Tumah. And the Gemara says the same question. Man, who's this saying this? Ilim Rabbanon Hashta. Well, my house, if in our Mishnah, where it's passively voice, and thousands of people walked in, and nevertheless they said to the and they said that it's still considered Rosh Hashanah, even though thousands of people walk in, and even though it's quite comfortable to walk through considering a passively voice. Hocha, in this kind of case where it's a movie, and you have to walk around the side, of course it's Rosh Hashanah. There was no chiddush whatsoever in telling me it's Rosh Hashanah. It must be Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is teaching you that when it's uncomfortable to walk, it becomes Rosh Hashanah. Not like you, Rava, that told me that even in the most uncomfortable place where you have to climb up with a rope or go one by one, single file, it's still considered Rosh Hashanah. No, banon. Oh, so what's the chiddush? Rosh Hashanah Tumah. It's the chiddush is for Rosh Hashanah that it's still considered. That means if you go a movie where the end of it there's a big hole, you're still considered for Tumah and Tau, Rosh Hashanah, since everybody walks around the hole. These special paths in Beis Gilgal, which is a place. What are they? They're so steep. If you'd ask a servant to pick up a saw of produce and run in front of an officer or policeman, he would not be able to. It's very, very steep. So such a place is Rosh Hashanah for Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah for Tumah. And you're going to ask me the same question. Mani, who possibly could have said such advice? And they're trying to teach you that Rosh Hashanah Hashta. What's the question? By passive voice in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, where it's very comfortable to walk, the Chachamim nevertheless said that's considered Rosh Hashanah, even if thousands of people go through. Over here, it's very steep that the person can't run up it carrying a saw of produce. Of course, it's a Rosh Hashanah. So the Chachamim didn't need to teach me anything. It must be Rabbi Yehuda that says that what? That even when it's uncomfortable, it becomes Rosh Hashanah. Omalei here didn't answer the same way. He chose a different answer. Shvile Beis Gilgal Kalmos. You talk about those pathways. Yeshua Oiv Yisrael. Omad v'tikenem dvochim v'svatya. Kolechet elichet hashvishta bosel l'rabim. Kolechet elichet hashvishta bosel l'yochit. The Gemara says like this: a whole new aspect, a whole new facet to this halacha. When Yeshua came to Eretz Yisrael, he wanted to make it the best possible land for people to live. Any land which he saw was smooth, he automatically made it into Rosh Hashanah. So any land in Eretz Yisrael which is smooth, you can be sure it's Rosh Hashanah. Any land, any pathways which are difficult to climb, he gave them to private owners, and they do not belong to the public. Now, it comes out that if you go up a steep path in Eretz Yisrael, you know for sure that where you're walking in a private owned domain. So even if there are thousands of people walking, over here you have another problem. Not only is it difficult to walk, but it actually belongs to an individual. And there I agree with you that's Rosh Hashanah. When you asked me the question, you were talking to me, let's for example, imagine on Leicester Road, suddenly somewhere in the middle they put a big pile of sand. And the only way to get up it is to climb up it, climb it down. There I said to you that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's considered Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda's shitta is that when the rabbin walks through, it's considered Rosh Hashanah. And I said to you, even if you have to climb up with a rope, it's always Rosh Hashanah. But that's because you were asking me a question which is actually Rosh Hashanah. But now you've changed it. And now you ask me about the pathways of Beis Gilgal. Those belong to the individual. When they belong to the individual, there I agree with you, it's Rosh Hashanah. And therefore it comes out, says the Ritvan, me and others, that the first statement which Rabbi Yechanan said was that there's no Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael. And we asked the question, what did he mean? And the Gemara Maskana said, we talk about steep places. Now we can say an extra thing, that because they are steep, automatically we can be sure they belong to private individuals. And therefore that is why they belong to this Rosh Hashanah. But if you go to England and you see a steep mountain, it could very well still be a Rosh Hashanah if it's got all the other aspects of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, it was quite complicated. That we'll stop here. And tomorrow we'll start from this Mishnah. I'm sorry about the question. I love the questions. It's just I wanted to be able to finish on time. I don't like to go too much. Oh, yeah, no. I like the question, Germany. So tomorrow we're going to have to slightly more than the daf. Okay.
You know, you can find out how many vehicles on the road.
Can you?
Yeah.
How?
On the small roads or
On many roads, they have an idea of how many vehicles there are. If I'm
Well,
on a new road, you can't find because there's different.
And you also have to know how many people in the car.
Yeah.
You
That-
can
that
You can
makes
work it out.
sense. People.
1.1. Is there any? Are there many
1.1
places?
what?
Do dogs count? Because if dogs count, you probably have a few 100,000.
No, but I think